Big game tomorrow against Manchester United at MetLife Stadium. Before we get to all of that, let's just start with why here? I see a lot of Spanish clubs come to the United States now. A lot of Italian teams do their pre-season tour here. Why is this so important for Arsenal Football Club?
Sure. Well, firstly, thank you for having me on the show today. The US has become our #1 international market. And we see that anecdotally. Every time we come to the US, we come every couple of years, we can see the games growing and we can see Arsenal's popularities growing. And we also see it in the numbers. So last season with NBC Sports, we had the record audience for Arsenal Manchester United. We see our social media following growing really fast. 20% of our retail business is in the US. And we played the MLS All-Star game in Washington, jam-packed full, and jam-packed full of Arsenal fans, which was great to see.
Great to see. Lots of money in it, I'm sure. You're also spending lots of cash as well. And I'm sure a lot of Arsenal fans want us to go straight there. How much have you spent this summer on football talent?
Well, so I guess the story about this summer really starts with looking back at last season. So last season we had what we consider to be a successful season. We took the title race right until the last weeks. In the end, we finished second rather than the first that we were fighting for. But we have one of the youngest squads in the Premier League. So this season they're going to be another year more experienced. And what we've done this summer is supplement that fantastic squad with 3 new signings, the 3 positions we wanted to strengthen, the 3 players we wanted. And we were delighted to get them right at the start of the window. So we have them here with us on tour in the US, and it means they can assimilate in the squad. And it was a heavy, significant investment. And that investment really shows the ambition of our ownership group. You know, they have had an enormous success with their franchises in the US over recent years, winning the Super Bowl, winning the Stanley Cup, and then winning the NBA Championship. So they've really invested behind the team and have really supported us this window. So we will be ready for the fight this season.
Thank you for making last season so interesting till the very end, and congratulations on your purchases. But let me put you in a tough spot, if I may.
Sure.
There's 2 views as to what model should major sports run. One is the UK model, where you don't have forced equalization, where you have relegation. One is the US model, where you don't have relegation, you have forced equalization. Mm-hmm. If you were to create the Premiership from scratch, would you keep the current model that allows a few teams to dominate all the time, or would you go to more like a US model that allows for far more equalization?
I'd keep the model that we have at the moment, and I think it's proven. The Premier League is the world's biggest league in the world's biggest sport, and I think one of the reasons the Premier League is so successful is the broadcast distribution in the Premier League is actually relatively equal. So the top club in the Premier League gets roughly 1.8 times the bottom club in the Premier League. So we try and keep the revenue distribution as equal as we can to make sure the league is as competitive as it can be. And it goes in cycles. Sometimes you have a period where teams dominate, and sometimes you have a cycle where it's more competitive.
I'm rooting for Sheffield United.
Sheffield this year?
Sheffield United, me and Joe Elliott, destined.
So being a QPR supporter and just looking up to the Premiership, you'll understand how we feel about our inability to ever penetrate because of what happens above us. But let me ask a question. So you're seeing all this US support come to Arsenal, and I'm hearing there's a lot more interest in soccer, as they call it here, on
yes,
there.
They do.
Is this a pull factor or a push factor? Is this people being pulled by the fact that NBC is covering more games, or is it the fans that are pushing people to talk more about UK soccer, including Tom and John?
I think it's a little bit of both. I think NBC have done a fantastic job for the Premier League over a long period, both in terms of how they promote the game and how they've also educated the audience around all things football. And we see it in their viewership numbers. I think NBC's viewership numbers last season were 20% higher than the season before. We've got our game tomorrow at MetLife. It's going to be a sellout. It's going to be our biggest ever game from a revenue perspective that we've ever played in the US. And I think it's going to be MetLife's biggest ever soccer game that they've had in their stadium as well from a revenue perspective. So the demand is really, really, really there, and it's growing really quickly.
Got to talk to you about Saudi involvement in the game, increasing through this summer, particularly over the last couple of years with that purchase of Newcastle more recently. What does it feel like as a CEO of a football club to be competing with a country? Not a single person, but a nation. What does that feel like? Do you feel like you're doing that now, this summer?
Well, the Premier League, one of the reasons the Premier League has been so successful is because it's so unbelievably competitive. And, Newcastle are another team that are stepping forward in that competition. They had a very successful season last season. They're in the Champions League. So it's always a dynamically changing market. Another big change that everybody's been talking about this summer has been the number of players they've actually transferred to Saudi. So that's another interesting development in the game. It's new. It's a little bit too early to know how that's going to affect the Premier League, if at all. And we'll all be watching with interest.